Alrighty guys, welcome to our college football week 13 part 2 video for the 2022 season. My name is Brock Page and I do sports picks for free right here on YouTube. And if you find yourself enjoying this video here today, please feel free to give it a thumbs up by smashing that like button. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to hit that subscribe button as well. I don't know, I mean, we got the thumbs up with the like, the subscribe button. I don't know what that is, but go ahead and subscribe because I'd love to connect with you on a daily basis. Now, there's 3 games on this week's college football slate that I'm betting on personally, and if you want to find out what those games are, I'll include a link to my college football tier package bets on my website in the description section below. Now, real quick, guys, let's go ahead and knock out a few shout outs from my friends in the comment section from our prior videos. Shout out to Lord X Ragey, who said, honestly, you need to do college basketball. You was better at that. Also a shout out to Derek Stevenson. No quick pick recap. Come on, Brock. And finally, shout out goes to Charles Tucker, who said, great work again, Big Brock. And of course, thank you guys for taking the time to comment in the comment section below. Always appreciate it. And with that, guys, let's go ahead and dive into our video here. We're going to start off with the Iron Bowl. I'm talking about Auburn taking on Alabama, and that'll be a 3:30 Eastern start time. For some reason, not on our big screen behind me. Come on. Yeah, it's coming up here. Anyway, Bama, they're minus 22, totals 49. Now, the Tide should pretty much win this one by a million. They're allowing only 7 points a game at Bryant-Denny Stadium. And they're first in the country in fewest yards allowed per play at home. Will Anderson's got 8 sacks on the year, along with 46 tackles and a pick 6. Meanwhile, offensively, these guys are averaging 40 points a game. They're facing an Auburn defense who has a tough time slowing down the run. They're allowing over 250 rush yards a game on the road. Meanwhile, offensively, these guys are zero threat to throw the football. They're throwing for just $119 a game through the air while traveling. Now, weather-wise, 65% chance of rain by kickoff. When it comes to the total, Bama will probably put this one over the number themselves. They did see overs against the likes of LSU, Tennessee, and Arkansas. Meanwhile, Auburn went 5-1 to the over in their last 6. I'm going to lean toward Alabama minus 22, over 49. Next ball game, Oregon State, 3:30 p.m. East. The Oregon Ducks are minus 3, totals 58. Now, this Oregon secondary might get exposed here on Saturday. They're allowing more yards a game through the air on the road than any other secondary in the country. And meanwhile, this defense as a whole, they rank 100th in the country in total yards allowed per play. Now, they're facing an Oregon State team who's been very good against the point spread this year. They covered in their last 5 straight, and they're currently undefeated against the number at home. This Oregon State defense has been tough to move the ball against. They're allowing only 15 points a game at Razor Stadium. They're also limiting their competition to just 188 passing yards a game in front of their home fans. Omar Speights and Keaton Oladapo, they've combined for over 120 tackles between the two of them. When it comes to the injury report, Fenwick, Lowe, and Golden are questionable for the Beavs. Meanwhile, for the Ducks, Cardwell and Florence are questionable for them. When it comes to the weather report, partly cloudy and 45 degrees at start time. When it comes to the total, Oregon State went 60% to the over in their last 10. The Ducks on the other side saw 6 out of their last 10 get over the number themselves. I'm going to lean toward Oregon State plus 3, over 58. Next ball game, little Big Ten action. I'm talking about Illinois at Northwestern. That'll be a 3:30 Eastern start time. Illinois is the 14-point favorite on the road. Totals 38. Now, the Illini should run all over these guys. Chase Brown, he has nearly 1,600 yards already on the ground, and he averages over 5 yards a carry. Meanwhile, defensively on the other side of the football, This is arguably one of the best defenses in the country. Illinois gives up only 12 points a game, and they're also in the top 3 in fewest yards allowed per play. Sidney Brown has 53 tackles, 4 picks, and 7 PBUs. Now they're facing a 1-win Northwestern team who's got one of the worst offenses in the Big Ten. They're actually in the bottom 10 in the entire nation in fewest offensive yards per play. When it comes to defensive performance, the Wildcats are amongst the worst teams in defending the run in the country. Now, injury-wise, Charlie Mangieri and Coco Azima, they're questionable for Northwestern. Meanwhile, for Illinois, Seth Coleman, Pat Bryant, Josh McCray, and Tyler Strain, they're all listed as questionable for them. Now, 45 degrees and 40% chance of snow by game time. When it comes to the total, Northwestern saw their last 3 straight stay under the line. 7-3 to the under in their last 10. Meanwhile, Illinois went 80% to the under in their last 10 themselves. I'm going to lean toward Illinois minus 14, under 38. Next ball game, some more Big Ten action. I'm talking about Minnesota at Wisconsin, 3:30 Eastern start time. The Wisconsin Badgers are minus 3.5, totals 36. Now, the Badgers have played some pretty tough defense this season. They're allowing just 15 points a game at Camp Randall, and they have a top 20 rush defense. Mema Jongmeta and CJ Getz, they've combined for 130 tackles between the both of them. Meanwhile, John Torchio leads the secondary with 5 picks. They're facing a Minnesota squad who's no threat throwing the football. They're actually in the bottom 15 in the nation in passing yards. Meanwhile, as a team, the Gophers failed to cover in 3 out of their last 4 road games. Now, injury-wise, quarterback Tanner Morgan's questionable to play. If the passing situation wasn't bad enough, actually, you might as well go with your backup. It can only get better from there. Meanwhile, for Wisconsin on the other side, Mullins, Rucci, Zachman, Dakovich, Large, Witt, and Ashford, they're all listed as questionable for them. When it comes to the total, Wisconsin's last 3 straight stayed under the number. Meanwhile, Minnesota went 7-1 to the under in their last 8. I'm going to lean toward Wisconsin minus 3.5, under 36. Next matchup, it is going to be Purdue at Indiana, 3:30 Eastern start time. Purdue's the 10-point favorite, totals 54. Now, Purdue won 7 out of their last 10 ball games, and they can certainly sling it all over the field. They have a top 15 passing offense on the road. And wide receiver Charlie Jones, he has over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. But it's not just offense at Purdue. These guys actually have a top 15 rushing defense away from home. Jack Sullivan and Corday Sidner, they've combined for nearly double-digit sacks between the both of them. Now they're facing an Indy team who lost 7 out of their last 8, and they do a pretty bad job covering the number. Out of the Hoosiers' last 10 ball games, they covered the point spread just 3 times. And even some more bad news for Indy backers, these guys have one of the worst secondaries in the country. Indiana's 115th in pass defense this year. When it comes to the injury report, Jennings, Jones, and Smith are questionable for Indy. Meanwhile, for Purdue on the other side, Thompson, Doru, and Jefferson are questionable for them. Total weather-wise, 51 degrees and 40% chance of a shower by kickoff. When it comes to the total, the Hoosiers saw their last 3 straight get over the line, 7-3 to the over in their last 10. Meanwhile, Purdue went 4-1 to the over in their last 5 on the road. I'm going to lean toward Purdue minus 10, over 54. Next ball game, it is going to be Wake Forest taking on Duke, 3:30 p.m. East. Wake Forest is minus 3, total 66.5. Now, quarterback Sam Hartman's thrown for over 300 yards and 32 touchdowns. The Deacs are currently throwing for over 311 yards a game. They're facing a Duke secondary who's one of the worst in the ACC. These guys actually rank 103rd in the nation in pass defense. Now, weather-wise, cloudy and a very slight chance of rain at kickoff. Probably not going to rain, but if it does, probably will not be for very long. Now, total-wise, the Blue Devils saw unders against the likes of Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, and Virginia. Meanwhile, Wake Forest saw 5 out of their last 7 stay under the line. I'm going to lean toward Wake Forest -3, under 66.5. Next ball game, it is going to be Hawaii, San Jose State, 3:30 p.m. East. San Jose State's the 15-point favorite, totals 57. Now, the Spartans are 5-0 straight up at home this year, and they played some exceptionally tough defense. They're allowing just 14 points a game in front of their own fans, and they do a great job of stopping the run. Kyle Harmon has a team-best 88 tackles along with 3 sacks. Meanwhile, Vil Fehoko and Cade Hall, they've combined for over 15 sacks between the two of them. Now, they're facing a Hawaii team who lost all their games on the road this year. These guys are also scoring just 15 points a game in their travels. Now, it should be a comfortable 63 degrees at kickoff in San Jose. And when it comes to the total, the Spartans are 4-1 at the under in their last 5 at home. While Hawaii went 67% to the under for the whole year, I'm going to lean towards San Jose State -15, under 57. Next ball game, it is going to be Memphis, SMU, 3:30 Eastern start time. SMU's -5, total 69. Now, I don't think the Mustangs are good enough on defense to cover this number. These guys are giving up 37 points a game on their home field. Their secondary is also in the bottom 25 in pass defense at home. They're facing a Memphis squad who won their last 2 straight themselves, and they have little issue throwing the football. These guys are actually in the top 10 in road passing. They're also scoring over 35 points a game. Now, injury-wise, Julian Barnett and Kobe Drake, they're questionable for Memphis. When it comes to the weather, mostly sunny and 53 degrees by kickoff. Now, total-wise, 3 out of SMU's last 4 did get over the number. Meanwhile, Memphis saw all of their road games this year get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Memphis +5, over 69. Next ball game, it is going to be UAB at Louisiana Tech, 3:30 p.m. East. The UAB Blazers are -17.5, totals 56. But for a team laying 17.5 points in this spot here, the Blazers have had a tough time getting the W on the road. Matter of fact, these guys are winless away from home this year, and they failed to cover in all 5 of those losses. Now, the Blazers averaged only 16 points a game in their travels, and they threw for just $1.69 a game in that same category. They're facing a La Tech team who has no issue getting on the scoreboard at home. These guys are averaging over 43 points a game on their own field. Running back Marquise Crosby, he's averaging over 5 yards a carry, and he scored 8 times this year on the ground. Now, weather-wise, partly cloudy and 57 degrees at kickoff. When it comes to the number, La Tech saw their last 4 home games get over the total. They're also 73% to the over for the entire season. I'm going to lean toward Louisiana Tech +17.5, over 56. Next matchup, UTEP at Texas San Antonio, 3:30 p.m. East. Now, the Texas San Antonio Roadrunners, UTSA, as I like to call them, they are the 17-point favorite at home, totals 56.5. Now, the Roadrunners won their last 8 straight, and they have a top 15 passing offense. Frank Harris has thrown for over 3,100 yards, and he ranks in the top 10 in the nation in QBR. Meanwhile, as an offensive unit as a whole, these guys are scoring over 38 points a game. They're facing a UTEP squad who's given up a whole bunch of points here lately. They allowed 32 points a game in their last 5 outings, throwing out that Florida International contest. They also failed to cover in 6 out of their last 10. Failures to cover against the likes of Rice, Middle Tennessee, and Louisiana Tech. Now, weather-wise, clear sunny day and 63 degrees in San Antonio. Beautiful day for football. When it comes to the total, 5 out of UTSA's last 6 ball games stayed under the number. Meanwhile, UTEP went 70% to the under in their last 10. Give me UTSA -17, under 56.5. Next ball game, Iowa State, TCU, 4 o'clock Eastern start time. TCU's the 9-point favorite on the road, totals 47.5. Now, the unbeaten Horned Frogs, they had a serious scare last week against Baylor. Should have lost that game, but found some good fortune in some precarious circumstances. But regardless of that, this is a secondary that hasn't been good enough. These guys are 95th in the country in pass defense. They're facing an Iowa State team who has little issue throwing the football themselves. Hunter Deckers is 20th in the nation in passing yards, and he has one of the best receivers in college football in Xavier Hutchinson. Hutch has 105 grabs for nearly 1,200 yards, and even though the Cyclones really haven't won many games, it ain't really for a lack of defense. These guys are allowing only 16 points a game, and they rank in the top 10 in fewest yards allowed. Now, injury-wise, star running back Kendre Miller, he's questionable Saturday for TCU. Now, weather-wise, breezy and 56 degrees by game time. When it comes to the total, TCU's last 3 straight stayed under the number. Meanwhile, Iowa State's last 7 straight all stayed under the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward Iowa State +9, keeping that one close, under 47.5. Next ball game, it is going to be Utah, Colorado, 4 o'clock Eastern kickoff. The Utah Utes are -29.5, totals 53. Now, the Utes have won 8 out of their last 10 ball games, and they have one of the better rushing attacks in the game. They're gaining 205 yards a game on the ground, and they score over 37 points per contest. When it comes to defensive play, the Utes are in the top 25 in fewest yards allowed. Cole Bishop and R.J. Hubert, they have nearly 130 tackles combined. Meanwhile, cornerback Clark Phillips, he leads the nation in interceptions with 6. They're facing a 1-win Colorado team who's no threat throwing the football. They're 116th in passing yards, and they're scoring only 14 points a game. Now, defensively, on the other side of the football, these guys allow more yards a game on the ground than any other defense in college football. Now, it should be a beautiful 50-degree day in Boulder with little to no wind. And like I said, if you're in Boulder, you're probably going to go ski because that's a beautiful day for skiing. There's still going to be snow on the mountain caps. But, hey, if you want to watch Colorado get smoked, go to the game. But anyway, total-wise, Utah should be able to put this one over themselves. They saw overs recently against the likes of USC, UCLA, and Oregon State. Meanwhile, Colorado went 80% to the over in their last 10. I'm going to lean toward Utah -29.5, over 53. Next matchup, Michigan State at Penn State, 4 o'clock Happy Valley. Penn State's the 18-point favorite at home, totals 52. Now, the Nittany Lions have been red hot against the number here recently. They covered in their last 5 straight. They're scoring over 35 points a game for the entire year. But the strength of this Nittany Lion team has been their defense. These guys are allowing only 18 points a game, and they're in the top 25 in fewest yards allowed. Jair Brown and Abdul Carter, they've combined for nearly 110 tackles. They're facing a Spartans team who's been pretty bad against the number here lately. These guys failed to cover in 7 out of their last 9, and they've had a tough time slowing anybody down. Spartans' defense is currently 103rd in total yards allowed. When it comes to the injury report, Broussard and Prim are questionable, plus a whole bunch of guys are suspended from that Michigan brawl. Meanwhile, for Penn State, Lee, Porter Jr., and Washington are questionable for them. Now, it should be cloudy and cold by kickoff on Saturday, 45 degrees, and maybe a sprinkle at Beaver Stadium. Now, total-wise, Penn State saw unders against the likes of Maryland, Northwestern, and Central Michigan. Meanwhile, Michigan State saw 4 out of their last 7 stay under the line, throwing out that Indy game. Give me Penn State -18, under 52 in the tight window. And it always feels like that Penn State-Michigan State game every year, no matter what location, it always ends up snowing. They're not calling for snow, but you never know in Happy Valley. Next game, Southern Miss, UL Monroe, 5 o'clock East. Southern Miss is -4.5, totals 52. And even though Southern Miss has hit a bit of a rough patch here, they've actually been a pretty good covering team here this year. These guys are covering in 73% of their ball games. And they're led by Malik Eat My Shorts, who has 86 tackles and 3 picks. And he may have a field day on Saturday against the Warhawks. UL Monroe is 103rd in the nation in rush yards. Meanwhile, defensively on the other side of the football, this Swiss cheese D is in the bottom 10 in total points allowed. Now, cloudy and breezy by game time in Monroe, Louisiana, and 4 out of the Warhawks' last 5 got over the line. Southern Miss also saw their last 4 straight get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean towards Southern Miss minus 4.5 over 52. Next ball game, Louisiana at Texas State, 5 o'clock Eastern kickoff. The Louisiana Raging Cajuns are minus 4, totals 45.5. Now, the Cajuns did cover in 4 out of their last 7, and they play some pretty tough defense. Zion Hill-Green and Andre Jones, they've combined for over 12.5 sacks. They're facing an anemic Texas State offense who's second to last in the country in rushing yards. And no real surprise here, guys, the Bobcats are also in the bottom 10 in total yards per game. They've actually, as a team, they've gotten the W just one time since October 8th. Now, injury-wise, Barbie and Banks are questionable for Texas State. And weather-wise, clear and sunny, 66 degrees in San Marcos. Now, total-wise, Texas went 60% to the under in their last 10. Meanwhile, Louisiana saw unders against the likes of Georgia Southern, Troy, and Marshall. I'm going to lean toward Louisiana minus 4, under 45.5. Next ball game, it is going to be Nevada at UNLV. Little psych out there. Anyway, Nevada at UNLV, and that'll be a 6 o'clock Eastern start time. The running Rebels are minus 13, totals 50. Now, UNLV covered in 3 out of their last 4. Covers against the likes of Fresno State, San Diego State, and Notre Dame. Austin Agiaki's got 120 tackles on the season, along with 3 sacks and a couple of picks. He's going up against a Nevada offense who scores only 18 points a game. They also rank in the bottom 10 in total yards per game. Now, as a team, the Wolfpack lost their last 9 straight, and they failed to cover 8 times during that stretch I just mentioned. When it comes to the injury report, comfortable and clear by kickoff in the desert. Now, total-wise, the Rebels went 4-2 to the under in their last 6. Nevada saw 4 out of their last 6 stay under the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward UNLV minus 13, under 50. Next matchup, it is going to be Appalachian State at Georgia Southern, 6 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Appy State's minus 5, total 62. Now, the Mountaineers are scoring 34 points a game, and they rank in the top 35 in total yards. Quarterback Chase Bryce, he's thrown for 27 touchdowns, and he actually ran in another 4 on the ground, so he's got 31 total TDs on the season. Now, he's facing a porous Georgia Southern defense who's in the bottom 3 in the country in total yards allowed. They're giving up a ton of yards per game. And, of course, they gave up 23 points or more in their last 10 straight. Weather-wise, cloudy and possibly wet by game time. 67 degrees and 65% chance of showers in Statesboro. Now, total-wise, the Eagles saw overs versus South Alabama, James Madison, and Georgia State. Meanwhile, Appy State saw overs against Marshall, Texas State, and JMU themselves. I'm going to lean toward Appalachian State minus 5, over 62. Next game, Middle Tennessee taking on Florida International, 6 o'clock Eastern start time. Middle Tennessee State's minus 19.5, totals 55 and a hook. Now, the Blue Raiders won 3 out of their last 4, and they failed to cover only 1 time during that stretch. Middle Tennessee's also done a good job throwing the football. They're in the top 35 in passing yards. Now, they're facing a terrible FIU secondary who's 106th in the nation in pass defense. Meanwhile, this defensive unit as a whole, they're allowing 38 points a game. There's actually only 4 teams in the entire country who give up more points than these guys. Now, weather-wise, hot and sunny in South Florida on Saturday. When it comes to the total, the Panthers went 3-1 to the over in their last 4. Meanwhile, Middle Tennessee went 6-3 to the over in their last 9. I'm Lead toward Middle Tennessee State, minus 19.5, over 55 and a hook. Next ball game, LSU at Texas A&M, 7 o'clock Eastern kickoff. LSU's the 9.5-point favorite on the road. Total's 46. Now, the Tigers won their last 5 straight, and they've done a pretty nice job covering the point spread. Out of their last 10 ball games, the Tigers covered the number in 70% of those contests. Now, this Tiger D is giving up only 20 points a game. They've also done a nice job slowing down the run. Micah Baskerville has a team-best 65 tackles along with a pick 6. When it comes to this pass rush, Harold Perkins and B.J. Ojulari, they have over a dozen sacks between the both of them. Now, they're facing a Texas A&M offense who's 108th in the nation in scoring. Meanwhile, as a team, the Aggies won only 1 ball game since September 24th. Now, injury-wise, Stewart, Ashane, Jones, Lane, and Wright, they're all questionable for the Aggies. Meanwhile, for the Tigers, Williams is listed as questionable for them. When it comes to the weather, clear and 51 degrees by kickoff. Texas A&M saw 4 out of their last 7 get over the number. LSU went 4-3 to the over in their last 7 themselves. I'm going to lean toward LSU minus 9.5, over 46. Next battle here, the directional Floridas. I'm talking about UCF taking on USF, and that'll be a 7 o'clock Eastern start time. Now, Central Florida is minus 20 on the road, total 69. The Knights got the W in 7 out of their last 9, and they're one of the best rushing teams in the country. R.J. Harvey's averaging over 7 yards a carry, and Isaiah Bowser, he has 13 touchdowns this year on the ground. They're facing a South Florida defense who allows over 225 yards a game rushing themselves. They're also giving up over 40 points a game. There's actually only one other team in the nation giving up more points a game than the Bulls. Now, injury-wise, Carter, Greenwald, Terry, and Weaver, they're all listed as questionable for USF. Meanwhile, Jean-Baptiste is questionable for Central Florida. When it comes to the weather, 75 degrees and a slight wind in Tampa Bay by kickoff. When it comes to the total, the Bulls went 7-3 to the over in their last 10. Meanwhile, UCF saw overs against the likes of Tulane, Memphis, and Temple. I'm going to lean toward UCF minus 20, over 69. Next ball game, Tennessee at Vanderbilt, 7:30 p.m. East. Tennessee's the 14-point favorite on the road, total 65. And even though the Vols are going to work with backup quarterback Joe Milton, he's actually shown some fairly good stuff in a short body of work. Milton's completing 70% of his passes. He's thrown 6 touchdowns with no picks. And he still has a deep ball threat in Jalen Hyatt. The wideout has nearly 1,200 receiving yards and 15 staggering touchdowns. They're facing a Vandy secondary who's the worst in the SEC. There's actually only one team in the entire country who allows more yards per game through the air than the Commodores. And no real shock here, guys. Vandy's 119th out of 131 teams in total points allowed. Now, weather-wise, cloudy and 60% chance of a shower by kickoff. When it comes to the number, I can't expect the Vols to run as smooth as they normally do on offense. They also saw unders against the likes of Georgia, Kentucky, and LSU. Meanwhile, Vandy saw 5 out of their last 7 stay under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Tennessee minus 14, under 65. Next matchup, big game, huge game. I'm talking about Notre Dame at USC, 7:30 p.m. East. USC's minus 5 at home, total 63.5. Now, both teams have some incredible talent on both sides of the football. USC's got one of the most powerful offenses in the nation right now. Meanwhile, Notre Dame's secondary is second to none. They're in the top 20 in the nation in slowing down the pass. And, of course, offensively, the Irish, they don't throw the ball that much. They're actually throwing for under $190 a game. But that said, on the other side, this USC secondary is in the bottom 25 in passing yards allowed. So really, we're seeing a lot of parity here. Now, weather-wise, 57 degrees and dry at the Coliseum by kickoff. And when it comes to the total, well, the Trojans saw their last 5 straight get over the line, but the Irish on the other side, they saw unders recently against Stanford, BYU, and Cal. Now, when it comes to picking a winner in this one, this game's being featured as my third and final college football tier package bet on my website. And once again, guys, the link for those plays is in the description section below. So as far as making a free pick goes for this game, no free lean, no freebie. Next matchup, it is going to be Oklahoma at Texas Tech, 7:30 p.m. East. Oklahoma is the 2-point favorite on the road, total 64. Now, the Sooners have done a nice job running the football this year. Eric Gray's got over 1,200 yards on the ground, along with 11 scores. Meanwhile, as a team, this Oklahoma offense is in the top 25 in total yards per game. They're facing a Texas Tech. They're facing a Texas Tech defense who has a tough time stopping the run themselves. They're 83rd in rush defense. They also lost 4 out of their last 7, with multiple games where they allowed over 40 points during that stretch. Now, injury-wise, Morton and Tharp are questionable. When it comes to the total, clear and crisp, 47 degrees at kickoff. Now, Texas Tech is 63% to the over for the year. Oklahoma saw overs against Baylor, Kansas, and TCU. Give me Oklahoma -2 over 64. Next ball game, little ACC action. I'm talking about Syracuse at Boston College, 7:30 Eastern kickoff. Syracuse is the 11-point favorite on the road, totals 46. And even though Syracuse hit a bit of a rough patch, they still have a pretty good secondary. They're allowing only 183 yards a game. And they actually rank in the top 15 in the country in that category I just mentioned. Jason Simmons has 7 PBUs along with an interception. Meanwhile, Caleb Ochekwu and Steve Linton, they have double-digit sacks between the two of them. They're facing a Boston College team who's averaging only 17 points a game, and they rush for fewer yards a game than any other team in the college football. These guys are dead last in rushing with 62 yards per contest. Now, as a team, the Eagles took the loss in 5 out of their last 6. When it comes to the injury report, quarterback Phil Yurkovich is questionable with that knee. Now, weather-wise, 43 degrees and mostly clear skies at game time. When it comes to the total, BC saw unders against the likes of UConn, Wake Forest, and Clemson. Meanwhile, Syracuse is 6-2 to the under in their last 8. I'm going to lean towards Syracuse -11, under 46. Next contest, it is going to be Tulsa at Houston, 7:30 Eastern start time. Houston's the 12-point favorite, total 67. Now, I'm not sure Houston's playing good enough defense to cover. They're allowing over 33 points a game. They're also in the bottom 10 in pass defense. Now, they're also facing a Tulsa squad who does a nice job throwing the football. Keelan Stokes, he's leading this receiving corps with nearly 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns. When it comes to the weather, clear and cool by kickoff. Actually 54 degrees in Houston by game time. Now, the Cougs are 9-2 to the over for the whole season. Tulsa saw overs versus the likes of South Florida, SMU, and Navy. I'm going to lean toward Tulsa +12 over 67. Next matchup, it is going to be Kansas at Kansas State, 8 o'clock Eastern start time. Kansas State's -10.5, total 62. Now, the 8-3 Wildcats are scoring over 32 points a game, and they do a pretty nice job running the football. Deuce Vaughn is over 1,100 yards on the ground, along with 6 scores. Now, they're facing a Kansas defense who's allowing nearly 20 yards a game on the ground themselves. They're also 119th in the nation in total yards allowed. Now, injury-wise, Wilson, Livingston, and Huggins are questionable for Kansas. Meanwhile, for K-State, Adrian Martinez is out for them. Looks like Will Howard, once again, a quarterback for the Cats. When it comes to the total, K-State saw 5 out of their last 8 get over the number. Meanwhile, Kansas went 4-1 to the over in their last 5. I'm going to lean toward Kansas State -10.5 over 62. Next matchup, Pitt at Miami, 8 o'clock East. The Pitt Panthers are -7 on the road. Total's 43.5. Now, the Pitt Panthers won their last 3 straight, and they've played some really tough defense this year. They're in the top 20 in fewest yards allowed. And they also have a top 10 rush defense. Servoja Dennis, he leads the charge with 85 tackles. He's also combined for 13 total sacks with Kalijah Cansey. They're facing a Miami team who's been awful against the point spread this year. Out of 11 ball games, the Canes covered the number only twice, and of course, that's good for just 18% in that category. Miami's also done very little to establish a ground game. They're 93rd in the nation in rushing yards. Now, injury-wise, starting quarterback Tyler Van Dyke, he's questionable with a shoulder. Meanwhile, Roberts, Lichtenstein, Parrish, and Smith, they're also questionable for the Canes. When it comes to the weather, warm and humid in Miami Gardens Saturday night. When it comes to the total, Miami went 60% to the under in their last 10. Meanwhile, Pitt saw unders against the likes of Syracuse, Louisville, and Tennessee. I'm going to lean toward the Pitt Panthers, -7, under 43.5. Next ball game, Air Force, San Diego State, 9 o'clock Eastern start time. The Air Force Falcons are -1.5, totals 44. Now, Air Force is rushing for more yards a game than any other team in college football. When it comes to defensive play, well, the Falcons are in the top 3 in the country in fewest yards allowed. Vince Sanford and Peyton Zadroic have double-digit sacks between the two of them. Meanwhile, T.D. Blackman and Trey Taylor, they have 61 tackles apiece. They're facing a San Diego State team who's little threat throwing the football. They're actually 120th in passing offense. They're also in the bottom 5 in total yards per game. When it comes to the when it comes to the weather, clear and mild at kickoff in San Diego. Pretty typical for this time of year. Beautiful part of the country, I hear. Never been there, but Andre Reed told me, and this is no cap, I've met Andre several times. His mom was a customer of mine back in the day, but Andre Reed said that San Diego is God's country. That's an exact quote. But anyway, total-wise, the Aztecs went 60% to the under in their last 10. Meanwhile, Air Force saw 6 out of their last 10 stay under the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward Air Force -1.5, under 44. Next matchup, Washington at Wazoo, 10:30 p.m. East. The Washington Huskies are -2.5, total 60. Now, the Huskies won their last 5 straight, and they're throwing for more yards a game than any other team in college football. Michael Penix is throwing for nearly 3,900 yards, along with 26 touchdowns. And no real shock here, guys. The Huskies are scoring 40 points a game. Now, they're facing a Washington State team who does not defend the pass well. These guys have the 97th ranked pass defense. That could be a recipe for the disaster in this one. When it comes to offensive production, well, they're in the bottom 25 in rush yards per game as well. Now, weather-wise, mostly clear skies and very chilly at kickoff. 32 degrees when this one gets started. When it comes to the total, Washington State went 9-2 to the under this year. Meanwhile, the Huskies on the other side, they saw their last 4 straight stay under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Washington, -2.5, under 60. And with that, guys, we're going to jump into our next and final matchup for the video. It is going to be BYU Stanford, and that'll be an 11 o'clock Eastern start time. BYU's -6.5, total is 58. Now, the Cougs won their last 2 straight, and they actually scored a whole bunch of points in the process. The Cougs are also doing a nice job throwing the football. Jaron Hall has thrown for nearly 3,100 yards this year. He actually ranks 8th in the country in touchdown passes. Now, he's facing a Stanford team on the other side of things who's allowing 32 points a game defensively, and they rank 111th in total yards allowed. Now, weather-wise, clear and chilly for kickoff in Stanford. When it comes to the total, the Cardinal went 60% to the over in their last 10. Meanwhile, BYU saw 6 out of their last 10 get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward BYU -6.5 and the over 58. And with that, guys, now it's time for our quick pick recap. Psych!